Hi, everybody. Welcome. It is one of my favorite days of the whole year, day that I get to spend one uninterrupted big segment with my dear brother, spiritual brother of another mother, Gregg Braden. So, welcome, Gregg. Thank you for being here. And for those of you who don't know how broad Gregg's teachings and field and knowledge and beautiful heart is, I want to tell you a few things about him that speak to what he has been up to for years now. He is a 5 times New York bestseller author. He's received the Visionary and Consciousness Award, and I want to hear about that. And in the Illuminate Film Festival, you were given the award for facilitating transformation and awakening and inspiring humanity. Wow. And then, of course, the Watkins Body Mind Journal has they've given you 6 years in a row the prestigious award of being one of 100 of the spiritually most influential people on the planet today. So, wow, you've been busy and building and being of such service to humanity. So, we could talk about any of that. And I have a whole list. So, I'm excited to get going. I welcome you, Gregg. Thank you for taking the time for your super busy schedule to spend with me.
Hey, Amber. Well, first, I just want to say I'm excited to speak with you as well. I get a little list, an Excel spreadsheet of my media every week from my office. And when I see your name in our interview, I always get a big smile on my face just because I love spending time with you. We don't get to do this very often. We have an event coming up in January, our annual event where I do get to see you and my brother, Lee Carroll. So I've been looking forward to this interview. And thank you for my introduction. I just have to share a quick story.
Yeah.
You mentioned that I have a breadth of what you complimented me on as a breadth of interest, and sometimes it's not so well appreciated. So I want to give you an example. Every once in a while, and those of us that do interviews know what I'm talking about here. Every once in a while, we interviewees get what's called a hostile interview, where the person doing the interviewing isn't necessarily on board with everything we're doing. So it was not long ago. It was a phone interview. Fortunately, it was not a video interview.
Yeah.
And I picked up the phone, and it was an early morning. It was a commuter traffic interview on the East Coast.
So live.
So, yeah, I'm in New Mexico, and they're a couple of hours ahead of us. So it was an early morning for me. And, and I'm happy to do those things. I like to talk to people when they're going to work.
Yeah.
So I'm all excited. I'm here in my office, and the interviewer, he didn't do a nice intro like you just did. And he didn't compliment me on any of my accomplishments. He didn't even say good morning or introduce my name. The first thing he said was, Braden, why can't you stick to one topic like everybody else? And I was taken aback a little bit. So I was silent. I thought he was kidding. And he said, man, you are all over the map. He said, why can't you just stick with one thing like everybody else? He says, are you talking about human DNA or evolution or the magnetic fields of the earth or ancient civilizations? He goes, what the hell are you talking about? Just stay with one thing and make it easy for everybody. And I thought for a moment, and I said, wow. I said, I appreciate what you're saying because my work does cover a lot of ground. But if you look closely, every book that I've written and every topic that I've ever explored with a live audience, it is one facet of our relationship to our bodies, to our lives, or to this world. So in a very real sense, I have stayed with one topic. It's just a very big topic. It's us and our relationship to the world. And he says, okay, let's go to station break. And he never came back. So I'm just saying, thank you for appreciating the breadth of my work. But Amber, this is something I learned a long time ago. I'm a scientist. I'm a degreed geologist, a very strong background in the life sciences, molecular biology, invertebrate and vertebrate paleontology, math, physics, computer science. And it all works to help me stay abreast of the new discoveries that are happening literally on a weekly basis.
Mhm.
in the world of science. Those discoveries typically are published in very obscure papers, really technical jargon, difficult to read.
Mhm.
And a lot of people just don't get to see, what it is that's happening. So my background helps me to stay on top of all that. But what I learned as a scientist is that nature doesn't know about the boundaries that we've imposed upon the way we study nature. So nature doesn't know about the box that we call geology or biology or chemistry or physics or paleontology or structural geology or whatever it is. Those are the little boxes that we have created so that we feel comfortable with the magnificence of this vast universe we live in, and trying to feel some level of comfort and
Mhm.
some level of knowledge about the situation that we find ourselves in. Nature doesn't know about those boundaries. So where we have come from in the past is we have compartmentalized our experience to such a degree that it's been very difficult to cross those traditional boundaries between the sciences. And what I've chosen to do is to do just that where it makes sense, honoring the principles of science, but crossing those traditional boundaries. I'm going to give you a perfect example. When I
Okay.
was a geologist working in the industry, I worked as what was called a computer geologist. And this was during the first energy crisis in the 1970s, way back in the 1970s. And I
Okay.
was I was studying the magnetic fields of the Earth as part of the process that I was doing professionally. And I could see very clearly the magnetic fields of the Earth were shifting rapidly, and they continue to do so today. And my first question is, wow, what does that mean to us? We're living in those fields. It's not like those magnetic fields are out there somewhere.
Mhm.
So what does it mean for us? And here's the telltale sign of where the compartmentalization leads us. My geologist friends, they all went like this. They put these little blinders on and they said, don't ask me, I'm a geologist. I don't know anything about biology. Go ask a biologist. And I went and asked my biology friends and they'd said, hey, we study cells. We don't know anything about the magnetic fields of the Earth. And that is a beautiful example of
Yeah.
how that compartmentalization keeps us from the deepest truths of our existence and our relationship to this beautiful planet we live on, and one another. So each facet of my work crosses those traditional boundaries to bring us answers that
Mhm.
are actionable, applicable, hopefully meaningful in our lives, and help us to feel a little bit better about our relationship to the world.
Well, I think that your interviewer didn't know what he was missing, but I
Oh, thank
find
you.
that, in the world we live in today that's so hectic, that so many people cannot handle more than one little box of information at a time. And if you've got more than that, they're gone. And we've given, and this is a lead in, we've given so much of our life and time to technology that it's always distracting us in one way or another. And to be able to focus on a broader moment of, connecting all these boxes that you talk about, and seeing how they connect. And of course they do, and we've made the boxes. But for us as people, that that's difficult because we're so, most people, and I will include a lot of my life because I do what you do and travel like you travel. It's really easy to get distracted and not be able to feel the beauty and the flow of all the moving parts.
Mm. Well, I think the key word is technology right there, and that is the topic of many of the conferences where I'm speaking at now, in 2019 through 20, and we've actually just completed our schedules into 21. And as strange as it sounds, I can tell you what stage I will be on in what week and month of the year, and what the topic is that I'll be talking about. And many people throughout the world, not just in America, but all over the world, they're asking to for me to help them understand the role of technology in our lives. And it goes beyond cell phones and the internet.
Right.
So I'm going to begin. Are you okay if I talk about this a little bit? Can we
Yeah,
just
I would love to hear.
flesh?
You're going to talk about this in Boulder in January?
I am. I'm going to talk about it in Boulder a little bit, but I want to flesh this out and just
Yeah,
kind of break this down a little bit.
to hear it.
There is a battle. I'm just going to say this. There's a battle that's playing out in front of our very eyes. It's playing out in our lives. It's been said the best way to hide something is keep it in plain view. And this secret battle that's playing out is in plain view of our everyday lives. And we become so accustomed to the way this battle is unfolding that many people don't even realize that the battle is happening. It's a battle, number one, it's a battle for our thoughts. And I think a lot of people understand that. The media is changing the way that it shares information with us. Less news, more propaganda, more opinions, and very specific opinions from the person sharing the information. So it used to be, back in the Walter Cronkite days, the job of a journalist was to, as objectively as possible, without any show of emotion or without any show of prejudice, simply state what has happened through the day. I remember the day Walter Cronkite shared that John F. Kennedy had been assassinated was one of the days where his humanness really showed through. He pulled his glasses off, held them in his hand, took his eyes into his hands so we couldn't see him crying. And that was very unusual for a journalist to show anything other than stoically describing what's happening. Well, we all know those days are gone.
Yeah.
Because now what's happening is we will have someone telling us, stating an event that has occurred, and then there is a very fuzzy gray area where rather than describing what it is that's occurred, we get to hear their perspective of the rightness or the wrongness or the goodness or the badness of what's happened. So we know there's a battle playing out for our thoughts, but the battle goes deeper. It's been said that our story, the human story, is so vital to our lives. American author Scott Turow very famously stated, "Who are we?" But the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves and believe. So it's not just what we say, but what do we actually believe about ourselves? Our personal story, who we are, where we came from as individuals, collectively. What is our potential as an individual? What is our potential as a human? So there's a battle that's playing out for our story. And there is a battle right now to maintain what is called the standard model, Amber. And that standard model, some people are familiar with that, many of our viewers, because you have a very sophisticated audience. They're accustomed to hearing the term standard model when it comes to physics, the origin of creation, the Big Bang Theory, the standard model, and the physics goes with that. But it goes beyond that. The standard model even extends into human origins. Where did we come from? And this battle is playing out in the universities. It's playing out in the corporations. It's playing out in religion. It's playing out in politics. And it's playing out in a really big way. So that battle is happening. But there is another battle that is even more profound, has even greater impact. Very few people are talking about it. And that is the battle for our very humanness. What's happening right now is that technology is evolving so fast that there are some scientists who are of the opinion that because we are capable of developing the technology, it gives us the license to automatically use it.
Yeah.
And this has been an ongoing conversation. I remember this when I was in the university back in the it was in the 70s, early mid 70s. And I remember this in the corporations, the scientists in the corporation around the water fountain and the coffee pots and, lunches. Two schools of thought. One school of thought says, if we were never meant to do the things that we're doing, we never would have figured out how to do them. That is one way of thinking that one school of scientists embraces wholeheartedly. And for them, it gives them carte blanche license. If you can do it, do it. Right. There's another school of thought that says that we will gain insights into the fundamental mechanism of Mother Nature and creation itself to understand ourselves and our relationship to the universe, but that we then must develop the morality to know whether or not we actually apply these principles in our lives. Embryo engineering is a perfect example.
Yeah.
We now have I think most of our viewers, if you're on the computer watching this, then you know what a word processor is, where you can cut and paste, letters or words or sentences or entire paragraphs and rearrange them in a document. So we've seen that. That exact technology is now available not for the words on a page, but for the genes in the DNA of your body. Literally, a strand of DNA will come up on the screen in a gene editor, and you can cut and paste on the screen the genes, and what you're doing on the screen is actually happening in the DNA of a living organism. Now, we developed the technology. It's known as CRISPR. It's been around for a few years, and I think most people are familiar with the term. And scientists, they're on board with it, and they said, yeah, we can use this in agriculture. We can use it, maybe for extreme diseases or something like that. Just last year, Amber, a Chinese scientist went public, mainstream, and proudly announced the first births of human babies that he had edited in the womb of their mother.
Genetically modified.
Genetically modified, yeah. And the scientific world came down on him like a ton of bricks. And they said, well, wait a minute.
Yeah, they did.
They said, we never agreed that we were going to do this. And he said, hey, the technology is here. So here's where we get into trouble with this. And this is only one example. We now have the ability to genetically modify an embryo in the womb of the mother. By what yardstick do we determine what changes, the changes that are made? And is it a board or a panel or an individual that determines what traits and characteristics are desirable and which ones are not desirable? And where we get into trouble with this is it is human diversity that has given us the biological strength of a species. And we begin breeding out things that maybe in one point in time we think is not desirable, maybe another point in time it is. So maybe at one point in time it's in vogue, to have certain colors of eyes or colors of skin or colors of hair or certain IQs. And so now the genie is out of the bottle. And I mean, this is only one small example. The point is the technology is developing so quickly, it is being embraced. And now I'm even talking about chips that are being developed to be implanted in the human brain to directly interface us with a hard drive of our computer with Bluetooth-like technology.
When my son was in high school and I wanted him to take a second language, I really, really wanted him to have a second language. And he just doesn't do well with that. And he said, Mom, I've decided I'm going to wait for the chip. and laughed, and I laughed, and now it's here.
Well, this is where I want to talk about that. This is where it gets really interesting. So what's happening? There's a battle, the battle playing out for our thoughts. We know about that. The battle for our story that's not so obvious. Mm-hmm. The story of, are we the product of random genetic mutations? Are we the product of just lucky biology, a fluke of nature? Or is there something more underlying our existence? So that's the battle for our story. The battle for our humanness. We now are being tempted to implant chips into our brain to begin to take over certain functions. The idea of sexuality is coming into this. There are cultures, Asian cultures right now, that are struggling with this because the digital relationships, the digital intimacy is replacing human body-to-body contact to such a degree. And young couples who are so busy with their careers are now opting for artificially intelligent babies, AI babies, that they care for at their convenience, rather than when a human baby would need to be cared for. But here's what's happening. The women are becoming infertile. The men the sperm count is dropping. The birth rate has dropped below the mortality rate. So more people are dying than are being born in some of these cultures. And what scientists are saying, the scientific community is saying, this is an example of use it or lose it.
Yeah.
So we have human capacities that are part of our nature. And if we give those capacities away to the machines, the chips, the technology, or we stop using them, they begin to atrophy in our bodies.
Sure.
And some of that technology is our ability to sense subtle forms of life, subtle forms of energy, the ability to sense beyond this three-dimensional world. So all of these and much more, we're at a crossroad where we're making this decision and most people don't even know that the decision is on the table. For me personally, Amber, I'm a scientist, and I'm not saying it's right, wrong, good, or bad. And I think there are places where these technologies can be very, very useful. The point for me is before we give our humanness away, I believe we owe it to ourselves to explore the full potential of what it means to be human so that we are conscious of what we're compromising and how much of ourselves we choose to give to the machines. Because once we lose certain abilities, once we stop using certain neurons in the neocortex, once we stop using certain biological functions, they begin to atrophy. In one generation, maybe it's interesting to have a chip that links you to the hard drive of your computer. The next generation, pretty soon, that's all anybody knows how to do. And 4 or 5 generations later, the neurons that have the potential, we already have neurons that can do something very, very similar. And I talk about these in our events. Our ancestors did how to cultivate those neurons. If we begin to implant the chips, we run the risk of losing access, losing the ability to use those neurons the way that we have had since we appeared on this earth 200,000 years ago. So it is the battle for our very humanness. And I think we cannot make those decisions until we embrace the deep truths of who we are, of our existence. And what's interesting, this is perfect symmetry, beautiful symmetry, and it can't be an accident. At the same time, these technologies are emerging. The new discoveries are revealing deeper potentials within us that we, as a modern Western society, always believed were relegated to only special people, to monks and nuns in monasteries, dedicating their lives to developing these potentials, or yogis, or mystics, or shamans, or curanderos. And yes, those people have developed these abilities, but now we know we can develop these extraordinary potentials in our living room without leaving our family and all of our worldly possessions and going to study on the mountaintop half a world away. So for me, what I personally believe we have called extraordinary human abilities, I believe are actually ordinary abilities that we have either forgotten or that we have never embraced in the 200,000 years of our existence. So this is where it gets really exciting to me, and it brings it all full circle.
Yeah, I love that. As you were talking about things being replaced, it occurred to me that, we talk about our phones and our computers as intuitive. And so does that mean that we're going to lose our intuition?
We know there is another school of thought, and I've explored this in some of our television specials. So there is a growing body of scientific inquiry that is suggesting that the things that we create in the world are more than diversions and entertainment. So the movies that we create in Hollywood, the books that we write, the music that we create, the sculpture, the art, and the technology that we create, that all of those things are consciousness creating in the world around us what it is that we're asking ourselves to embrace about the world within us.
To bring
And
it forward.
if you think about this, my Native American friends talk to me about this a lot. If you think about this, it's very interesting because the internet, for example, it's a perfect example. The connectivity that the internet has allowed physically among people on a planet is actually mimicking the connectivity between neurons within the human body, the heart, as well as the brain, as well as other organs in the body.
I like that.
Yeah, well, you know, I think a lot of our viewers probably know I worked in after my career as a geologist, I carried that career into aerospace. It happened during the time of the Cold War in the 1980s. And so I was assigned to the defense side of the house rather than the aerospace exploration side of the house in the company I was working for. And I ended up working on some very sophisticated technology. At that time, it was called SDI, Star Wars Defense Initiative. And I have to tell you, I mean, it was pretty eye-opening for me to see the level and the depth of technology that we'd achieved in the 1980s. I mean, the types of lasers and the ability to communicate, interplanetary and things like that, to send signals into space almost instantaneously and all those things. So I have seen a lot of very advanced technology. And Amber, I have to tell you, honestly, I have not seen all technology on the planet, obviously.
Of course.
All technology on the planet that I have seen or that I have witnessed or that I'm aware of, I have yet to see any technology in the world around us that does not mimic what we already do in the world within us. Every cell of our bodies, the average human, it's said, has around 50 trillion cells, give or take. Every one of those cells is a little electrical circuit. We've got voltage potential, 50 trillion volts or more, at least 1 volt per cell. Every one of those cells it works like a little circuit. So we've got resistors, we've got transistors, we've got capacitors. We store information, we receive information, we receive photons of light, we emit photons of light, we communicate with other cells. All of the things that the technology outside of us is doing are mimicking precisely what it is that we either do or we have the potential of doing from within. So what my Native American friends say, and this is a conversation I talk about in some of my books back in the 1990s. I met a Native man in Chaco Canyon, the archaeological site in the Four Corners area of New Mexico. And for a number of reasons, rather than just a casual meeting and passing, we ended up involved in a deep conversation. And he said to me, he said, the world that we live in now, and this was in the 90s, he said, the world we live in now, the people of the earth are lost, he said. And our native people, our indigenous traditions tell us a long time ago, people lived close to the earth, they knew who they were, they remembered, but something happened and they began to forget who they are. He says, nobody knows exactly why we began to forget. But he said, we as humans, we so long for the deep connection that we once had and that we know is possible. We so long for that connection with the earth, with the elements, with the unseen worlds, and with ourselves. Yeah. We so long for this. He said that we began to build machines outside of our bodies to remind us of who we are inside of our bodies. He said, we live in that world right now. And he said, we will continue to clutter the world around us. We're going to build and clutter our world with so many devices and so many gadgets until that world is unsustainable. And he said, when we remember that everything that we've built is telling us who we are, he said, then we let that cluttered external world go and we begin to live a much simpler yet technologically sophisticated life because we've embraced our inner technology. And I think back to that story a lot, and I cannot help.
What a prophecy, huh?
Yeah, well, I can't help but believe, or at least suspect, that what he's talking about is exactly what we're seeing right now,
Yeah.
because
Mm.
the technological world that we're developing, it's not sustainable in the long term.
No. No.
Uh, the technology is we will not live
Right.
uh, through that technology. So we now are at this very, very powerful crossroad. Very few people are talking about how much of ourselves do we give away to the machines, to the devices, to the technology. How much of ourselves do we surrender, and to what degree? Now, I just want to be really clear. I mean, there's some really good technology from my perspective is never right, wrong, good, or bad. It's how it's applied.
Absolutely.
You
Yeah.
know, we split the atom and learned how to build the bomb. I'm in northern New Mexico, Santa Fe.
Yeah.
Los Alamos is right up the road from me, the Manhattan Project. I'm in awe of the minds, and what could have happened there, what did happen. Brilliant, brilliant men and women
Hmm.
solving the deepest mysteries of creation in the universe. It happened during wartime. So everything that they thought about, that they developed, all those discoveries were channeled into weapons because it was during wartime. But there are certainly other applications that have nothing to do with war. We all know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the technology is not right, wrong, good, or bad. It's how it's applied. So a perfect example, I'm talking about chips in the brain. Where I think it's a mistake is to use them recreationally. However, if you're one of our very brave, very beautiful young men and women who are serving on a battlefield halfway around the world in Iraq or Afghanistan, and you have lost functions in your limbs from IEDs or something like that, those chips can make a difference between your ability to take a glass of water in your hand and drink it for yourself and hold your loved ones, or have someone else do that for you for the rest of your life. So the technology, we've developed it. And I think it's a good thing we developed it. It's how we apply it in our lives. Does that make sense if I say it that way?
Yes, it does. And it makes me wonder, where do we, or who are we that decide how that technology is used? You said before, what's the panel or the judges or the, who decides that? And how do we, how do we make sure we don't have somebody saying, yes, everyone should have blonde hair and blue eyes and be 6 feet tall?
Sure. Well, this is the point. How can you even make that choice if you don't know that
Yeah.
we're at the crossroad?
Yeah. Yeah.
To solve any of these problems, we've got to be honest about the problem. How can we solve a problem if we're not honest about the problem? And that is what
Mhm.
uh, I see. We have a weak internet connection. I'm sorry.
It's
Am I
okay.
back? Here
It's
I
back.
am. Okay.
Yeah, it's back.
Yeah, and that's what I'll be talking about. I'll be with Lee Carroll, Boulder, Colorado, in early in January, and we'll be having this very conversation. But I have the opportunity to share with you the illustrations
Yeah.
that really help us to understand what this technology is all about, and beyond that, what our technology, our inner technology, our human potential is
Mm.
really all about. You
Mm.
know, it's been thought for a long time that because we do so many heart transplants, because we do so many organ transplants, because we've extended lifespans now between 70 and 100 years, that we understand pretty much everything there is to understand about the human body. The last 2 years, so I'm talking about 2018, 2019, new discoveries are being made. They're just blowing the doors off of what we thought
Yeah.
was true.
Yeah.
New neurons, entire two classes of neurons have been discovered in the human brain. They've always been there. We never knew how to look for them.
Mm.
And these aren't just any old run-of-the-mill neurons. I mean, these are important neurons that regulate information and how it flows, how it's processed, and actually our ability to access different states of consciousness. The neurons in the human heart that were discovered in 91, it wasn't published until 94. And even today, I was just in a live event 2 weeks ago, and we had cardiologists in the audience that were not aware of the existence of 40,000 plus sensory neurites in the human heart that send signals and communicate with the brain, telling the brain how to regulate functions in the body. Nobody is teaching this stuff. They
Wow.
said, why don't we know about this?
Yeah. Good
So
thing maybe
we're only beginning
there.
to understand. Well, but what even beyond, we've spent 100 years now understanding the bits and pieces of how the human body works. And what now is happening is we're beginning to understand our ability to mesh together the different systems within our own body. It's called self-regulation,
Mm.
to achieve states of health, states of awareness, states of cognition, and states of consciousness, to combine these different systems so that they are more in their union than they are individually. And we are born with the ability to do that in ways that very, very few people. I wish somebody had taught me this when I was, when
Yeah.
I was a kid in school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that is a lot. And I'm excited about having you in Boulder. And before we wrap up here, can you just talk a little bit about something I came across today called Truth and Fiction on your beautiful new website?
Well, I can. Do I have a couple of minutes to
Have as
unpack that
much
a little bit?
time as you need.
All right. So I think most of our viewers know I am a Hay House author since 2004. Prior to that, I was a Random House author. I love being with Random House and I love being with Hay House. They're good people, good publishers, and they have done an awesome job of helping me share my message of human potential and what they call self-help. Uh, as I alluded to in the beginning of this conversation, the breadth of my work extends beyond self-help, and that's what the interviewer was talking to me about. Why can't you stay with one topic? We are complex beings. We are multidimensional beings, and we live in a complex world. And my personal passion, I feel that we owe it to ourselves to know, to understand what our relationship is in these different aspects of our lives. So through my experience with Hay House, the self-help aspect has been developed very well, very deeply. And they have managed my website and social media and marketing and PR and all those things. I recently made a decision to take our website as my own company, take it back, and expand and develop it beyond the self-help realm, still including self-help, and I'm still doing self-help programs and developing those understandings. But there's so much more to what I'm doing. The archaeological discoveries that I'm involved with as a consultant that are helping us to understand our relationship to the past and even to the cosmos. I hope that's intriguing.
Yeah.
And the new discoveries, the science-based discoveries that I think many people are very fascinated about. One of the things, Amber, that we are constantly inundated with, I say we, my office, wisdom traditions, either through personal communications or emails or social media and things like that. People feel like they are so inundated with so much information and so many disparate points of view. Some of it is true, some of it is misinformation, so honest mistakes. Some of it is disinformation,
Yes.
intentional information that is wrong, leading people away from the understandings that help us to make wise choices in our lives. So I have, rather than answer those people one-on-one or one at a time, I'm developing a new site on our website, Truth and Fiction, and I will have the opportunity, primarily through brief video vignettes. Some of it will be written. I do a lot of my writing on airplanes, so it's hard to do the videos on the airplanes.
Yeah.
But I will do my best as a scientist to objectively share the science that is influencing policy and politics in our lives today, because where do you draw the line
Right.
between the scientific discoveries, the politics that are pushing those discoveries to go one way or another, and then the policies that ensue that determine what we are able and allowed to do in our lives. And it's a very fine line. So I have chosen to develop this platform, this format. It is we're still developing the content right now. I want to do a very good job. I'm going to begin with climate change, probably,
Mm.
because so much of that is driving a conversation in terms of politics and policy
Right.
right now. But it goes beyond the climate change. I've got so many questions about the 5G that is coming online,
Yeah.
and what that means, about vaccines and what that really means. So there's a lot of information out there. The science, my personal feeling is that when we share the facts, when the truth is obvious, our choices become obvious. When the truth of the scientific discoveries are made objectively, then we generally know how to make the decisions that are best for us
Yeah.
personally, for our families, for our communities, for our nation, and for our planet.
That's a
And
great.
what's happening right now is science has been hijacked by
Yeah.
politics, religion, corporations, uh, um, alternative agendas, and that science is being cherry picked. And so someone will say, well, science says this,
Oh,
therefore we need to make that may be a partial truth. So it's an opportunity for me as a scientist, and I feel I'm uniquely qualified in our genre as an earth scientist, as a geologist, to be able to unpack a little bit of what the climate science is actually sharing, and we'll see where that goes.
I think that's great. And I think to have you as a resource for those questions, because I see so much that's like posted in Facebook feeds, and and it's scary, and it's dated, and it's it doesn't really have people behind it that know what they're talking about. And
You know, Amber, yes, that's true. And it goes even beyond that. And I'm seeing this in my own community. It is divisive
yeah,
because the information, young people are being told things that are not true. And they are so impassioned
yeah,
that now they feel, and we just saw this, there's a climate rally here in northern New Mexico a few weeks ago. Young people were impassioned and they felt empowered to go and destroy property that they felt was not contributing to a better world and a better environment, which is
yeah,
it's dividing our community. It's dividing families. We see this. It's Bruce Lipton. I know you've interviewed Bruce, or our viewers know about Bruce Lipton's work. Bruce Lipton and I were invited as a team a couple of years ago to speak at the United Nations about this very topic. Me as an earth scientist, Bruce as a life scientist. We both talked about cycles of life, resilience, cycles of climate. And they asked us to come and share the discoveries. We did just that. I don't know that we'll ever be invited back uh,
yeah,
because the deep truth of the climate story
yeah.
runs counter to some very deeply held beliefs that are based on false assumptions and obsolete science. So it's for people, if they are open to the new discoveries, and science is designed to be constantly updated. So I will do my very best. If I state something and a new discovery comes out and says something different, I'm very comfortable sharing that something different.
Yeah.
Let's be honest with ourselves. How can we solve this if we're not honest about it?
Yeah, very good point.
Yeah, thank you for asking, Amber. I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
yes, of course. And speaking of the future, how about the next Gregg Braden book?
Ah,
Yeah, what can you tell us about
you
that?
know,
Or what can
there,
you reveal?
yeah, well, there is a book. There's always a book. I have a 3 to 5 year rolling business plan where I have to know today what book I will be releasing 5 years from now. And in 2020, spring of 20, I will be releasing a new book. It's a very different book for me to write, Amber. It's a small format book. It's not designed to be an encyclopedia of knowledge. It's a small format book called The Wisdom Codes.
Mhm.
And it is based upon the principle that was described early in the 20th century by a linguist. His name was Benjamin Lee Whorf. I guess, are you familiar with Benjamin Lee Whorf, for
Not
example?
until
Or?
this moment.
Well, it's really interesting. He was a university professor, and what he discovered in working with the Hopi in northern Arizona is that the words that we use to express ourselves determine not only how we think in our day-to-day lives. This is big. They determine what we are even capable of thinking about, what we are capable of
Okay.
conceiving,
Wow.
because the words that we use direct the neurons in our brain, and we now know in other parts of the body, including the heart. Our words direct the neurons to wire in very specific ways, and that wiring determines our worldview. So for the Hopi, who see the world as one living entity, as a living entity, the Hopi see the cosmos as alive. Every rock is alive. Every tree is alive. The water is alive. But here's where it's interesting. They have no words to describe the future, no words to describe the past. They cannot reference anything other than the now moment. So if you were a Hopi standing on the beach in Cancun, watching a wave come in, they don't say the wave, they say it is waving, because it is constant, in motion, in present, alive, and now. And because of the language, the Hopi language is based on unity rather than separation. They see this connectedness that we hear about, but it's hard for us sometimes to grasp. So this is a beautiful example of the power of these words. What I have done, I've been fascinated, I've been aware of this most of my adult life, I've been fascinated by it. And in my time in Egypt, in the Middle East, in Asia, in the Andes of South America, and Bolivia and Peru, and all through the desert Southwest, and my time in India and Nepal, and all these indigenous cultures, and the texts that I've had the opportunity to explore, from the Hindu texts and the Gita and the Mahabharata, and so many of the Buddhist traditions. We as humans have always had certain words or word patterns that we have used to give us comfort in times of need, to help us get through a difficult time. And what I've done is collected those words and word patterns and categorize them in terms of the human experience of fear, for example, or loss, or love, the loss of love. The parables that are described in some of the ancient biblical texts certainly carry these as well. Very, very powerful patterns of words. When we repeat these words as mantras, they begin to change the way we think about our situation. Doesn't change what happened, but it helps us to be stronger to get through that situation. And that's what the book, The Word Codes, is all about. That will come out. Small format book. It's designed just to be like a quick little reference book. I didn't want to make it really technical, with a bunch of footnotes, and like I have some of my other books. So you are actually the first person I've shared that with.
Well, I feel honored. Thank you.
Yeah, the book will come out, I believe, in May of 2020.
In time for my birthday. Yeah.
I'll send you an autographed copy.
All right.
All right.
Well, Gregg, as always, this has been just a very full and delicious time with you. I thank you so much. And
Amber, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for inviting me.
It's always,
we've done this before, and you invited me back anyway. So thank you for inviting me again. So can I count on one next year? Can I say I look forward to our next?
You can.
All right. Until our next time.
2020. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Gregg. I really appreciate your time, your energy, and your dedication to the world.